Is it really gonna try this? Oh my gosh, it is. Oh my gosh. All right, everybody, I have some breaking news for you. Since we've last spoken, apparently the FSD beta has gone full evil cyborg. Luckily, though, a concerned citizen named Dan O'Dowd, who definitely has nothing to gain from the publicity this will give him, spent about $250,000 to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times to warn everybody about the dangers of what he claims is the worst software ever. That is the technical term. And that if it would kill millions of people if it was used in every car, not every year, not every month, not even every week, but millions would be dead every single day. I'm sorry, I swear I really tried to get through that without laughing. It's just that this goes so against my experience and Tesla's very open statements about vehicle safety being their absolute highest priority and what drives their decision making. In fact, if you've watched some of my previous videos, one of my biggest critiques about the current FSD beta, which is still a problem in this version, is that it acts a little too safe around pedestrians. But anyways, just as a quick sanity check, let's go ahead and see who's paying Mr. O'Dowd's bills so we can make sure there's no conflicts of interests here. Let's see, looks like we got Toyota, some software that drives cars that I've never heard of, Ford, who has their Blue's Clues system, Mobileye, who's trying to make their own autonomous car, nothing to be concerned with yet. Oh, but wait a second, what is that? Is that what I think it is? Yep, you heard it here first, folks. O'Dowd is sponsored by the internal combustion engine itself.
Do you have a huge financial interest in a competing solution? Is that part of the reason that you even started looking at this technology and are so critical of it?
Well, no. I mean, a financial interest in a way. I have no, as you guys say, I have no, when you say I'm a competitor, I help BMW, I help Daimler, all the big companies, GM, we supply software for those people to do it. I think it's completely wrong-headed just even to say that. Yeah, sure, we're a competitor in a moderate way. I don't make cars. I don't make self-driving software. I make software that people who make self-driving software use to do their job.
All right, obviously joking here, but I thought this presents a nice opportunity to go back to basics and do a full uncut drive so I can't be accused of cherry picking in the most dangerous place to drive that I know of, good old San Francisco. There is always a bunch of pedestrians and damaged human neural networks driving cars doing all sorts of odd things. And this drive has plenty of examples of that, so surely if the advertisement had any merit to it, we'd see some evidence of that in the most stressful location to drive that I know of. We're kicking off this drive at the Supercharger on Geary Boulevard, and we'll be choosing random points on the map to navigate to, trying to put it in as many difficult situations as possible. Already a bit of awkwardness as we're leaving this parking lot. You can kind of hear it pumping the brakes back there as it slowly creeped forward, and I also don't like how it stopped in the middle of this entryway. There were no cars trying to get into this parking lot at this time, but if there were, we might have caused a bit of an awkward situation. You may also notice the nice big crack on my windshield there. I have an appointment to get it fixed after I return from vacation early next month, so hopefully this is the only video where it's visible. I also did spend a bunch of money on new equipment to record the visualizations, so hopefully you notice an improvement there. As you're watching this video, please also give me some feedback. I do read every single comment, and all feedback is extremely welcome. I've made a ton of improvements using suggestions you guys have come up with, so please keep the comments and suggestions coming. So we have our left-hand turn signal on right now, which I'm not sure is the right move. There's no markings in this lane for whether it goes straight or it's right turn only, and then in front of us it seems like it's just one lane. So I'm not actually sure if maybe just the ground markings have disappeared or what. I don't know. In the car, that turn signal felt wrong, but reviewing it on the video here, it might have actually been correct. I'm not sure. As usual, going to be fast forwarding through these quote-unquote boring parts where nothing particularly noteworthy is happening. Just a car that anyone can go out and buy driving itself through San Francisco. No big deal. Here's an interesting situation that shows the path prediction pretty well, where a bicycle is creeping forward into the intersection and the beta slows until it knows for sure it's safe to proceed. May have been a little hard to see in this particular case, but there's plenty more examples like this during this drive. Up ahead, we have a pedestrian who is leaning into the rear door of their car. The beta seems to recognize this and gives them plenty of space. I thought that was handled very well, especially because only a little bit of the pedestrian was hanging out of the car door, and it still seemed to recognize the situation pretty well. Another pedestrian walking across the street. There's also a car approaching quickly behind us, and the beta actually waits for the car to pass before shifting over in the lane to give the pedestrian more room. A few opportunities to go evil cyborg here, but the beta stays dormant for now. Few things going on up here. We have a car backing up in the road and making cars going around. They're just backing down the middle of the street. There's also the yellow lights flashing for the pedestrians. We didn't really have to stop here. A pedestrian does kind of appear to the left and begins walking through the crosswalk, but I wouldn't have stopped there myself. This probably is some pretty difficult behavior to program though. Like everywhere else I drive, a flashing light at a crosswalk means always stop, except in San Francisco where it's always flashing. And then at that point, you just have to worry about locals rear-ending you because they aren't expecting you to stop. The bicycle that just passed us ends up putting us into a bit of a tough situation ahead. We have to pass them, but there isn't a ton of room to do so. I personally would probably just switch lanes, but let's see what the beta decides to do. A pretty uncomfortable and kind of unnecessary almost emergency maneuver there where the beta just kind of swerves into the left-hand lane to get around him real quick, and then when a car approaches from behind us, it decides to get back in its original lane and like turn on the turn signal to do the lane change properly. The other thing here is that we are stopped in the middle of this intersection. I really don't like how the beta still proceeds into intersections when the lanes haven't completely cleared. It ended up being fine in this case, but if the traffic was completely stopped ahead, we would be stuck in the middle of this intersection. You'll see the Mustang to our right turn on its turn signal here in a second. It still doesn't seem to recognize the turn signals yet, and instead seems like it's just going off the vehicle behavior instead. The beta's now planning to get into the left-hand lane because we have left-hand turn ahead, and watch it quickly realize that traffic is stopping ahead, and then pick a better moment for the lane change. Then while all my attention is going over my shoulder to my blind spot to make sure we have enough room, a pedestrian blindly walks into the street without even slightly glancing at incoming traffic. This is how quickly tragic accidents can happen, and in fact do happen every single day. And while it's impossible for us humans to give our attention to all directions at once, the beta handles it with ease. Not trying to get too intense here, but I really do feel like the people who are actively trying to prevent the development of this software for their personal gain are going to have some blood on their hands. We do make it through this yellow light, and then it seems to get a little tripped up by this odd intersection design and starts slowing for a moment, but does get through it without doing anything too uncomfortable. Autopilot does act pretty robotic with the situation ahead though. Traffic is coming to a complete stop ahead, and even though we have plenty of room to go around this Prius, it just stops in the middle of the intersection like a true robot here. I didn't want to take over until the light turned red, and lucky enough, a gap formed ahead to make the beta confident enough to go around. But unfortunately not quite fast enough to avoid being honked at. Yeah, probably a pretty well-deserved honk there. If I was in the other car looking at this, I probably would have just thought they were a bad driver and we're not going to continue. Also, I can guarantee you the beta was not reacting to that honk. It was probably just moving forward when that Prius moved up and we had enough room. It's now our turn to go, and we have another pretty crazy pedestrian just walking through the middle of the street while we have a green light. The beta does slow down and acts pretty cautiously around here, as it should have, but it doesn't stop, and I actually preferred this decision. I bet the San Francisco locals behind us would have been pretty upset if we came to just a full stop right there. The person directly ahead of us is now trying to squeeze into that right-hand lane, and I think it's pretty impressive how early on the beta recognizes this and knows it just has to go around. So, although the beta isn't really paying attention to turn signals, at least I don't think it is. I mean, that guy didn't even have a turn signal on. It does seem to do a really good job at kind of guessing where vehicles are going in the future based on what they're doing right now. Kind of something that goes hand in hand with driving experience, don't you think? So we are supposed to be going straight here. I brightened up the nav screen there so you can see it the best as possible, but at kind of the last moment, the beta decides that it wants to turn left. It might have been because of that like oddly painted line there, but it does try to end up going into the left-hand lane for what it thinks is going straight through this intersection, but obviously is not. You can kind of just see the indecisiveness on the blue path planner there. It's pretty funny. The beta almost seems like it realizes this as well. It ends up turning off the turn signal. We're still kind of like awkwardly positioned with our steering wheel to the left, but it does get itself kind of straightened out and gets back into the correct lane to make it through this intersection. If you go back and kind of take a look at those arrows on the ground, they were definitely pretty abnormal, and I think that the beta might have actually been tripped up a little bit by that. The FSD beta did hunt down a few Waymos during this drive, completely by accident, I swear. Just do think it's funny. Another kind of abnormal right-hand turn here with a lot of markings on the ground and weird things going on. It actually completes the turn fairly well, and then does not like the look of the pavement ahead, which I can understand, and comes to a complete stop. Yeah, luckily there was nobody tailgating me at that very moment. Also seems like it avoids the rough concrete on the right-hand side there, but I think it's probably more likely that it just went towards the stop marking on the ground, rather than consciously making that decision. This road definitely isn't very well marked. There is no real lane guidance lines. Like, there's some parking lines there, and there's like stop lines and stuff, but not a great road. And you can see the beta having a little bit of difficulty kind of planning a path ahead here. No other cars around during this time, so not a huge deal, but it is definitely not the path I would have taken through that intersection. All right. So, what are you guys thinking about the performance so far? Please let me know in the comments. I really do always love seeing the discussions about the status of overall autonomy, and would really like to see your opinion on where you think we're at right now. During this next right-hand turn ahead, I seem to have applied a little bit too much pressure on the steering wheel and caused an accidental disengagement here. It was about to do this corner fine, but I don't know, I didn't feel like I had that much pressure on the steering wheel, but it still caused the disengagement. Up on the right here, we have a couple of pedestrians kind of hanging out in the back of their car, and then a bicycle runs this stop sign. Autopilot makes a very unnecessary emergency brake. I'm actually not sure which one caused it. It had the pedestrian highlighted in red, but then it also displayed a message saying that it was like waiting for the cyclist. I think there just might have been too many things going on at once, and the beta got a little freaked out there for a second. We are slowing down here because we've reached the end of our navigation route, and because I had somebody behind me, I went ahead and pulled over until I put in a new route into the navigation. So far, though, I must say, even with its occasional robotic behavior and mistakes, I think there is a lot to be excited about with version 10.9. The car feels smoother with every update. This one is definitely no exception. And not only that, but it also feels like it's reacting to situations more quickly than it did before. San Francisco really is a tough driving environment. I even stress out quite a bit driving here anytime I have to, because it's just terrible. And seeing the improvement in this area over the last year since I've had the beta has just been absolutely amazing. So I didn't really like the nav route that I chose. It was kind of too straight, not enough turns. So I put the beta into a bit of an unfair situation here, updated the nav route, which had us making a left at this intersection. Obviously, we are not in the left-hand turning lane to do this properly, so yeah, let's go ahead and see how the beta reacts to this one. Light turns green, the beta stays put and seems like it's just waiting for traffic behind us to clear. Does end up kind of switching lanes in the middle of this intersection, then slows down when it realizes there's no way it can make it, just continues along straight and then updates the navigation route. Although this wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, I really liked that it handled it without confusing some of the drivers around me. When the beta starts recovering from some of the mistakes it makes, in a very similar way that humans recover from mistakes that they make on the road, we're gonna know that we're pretty close. We have a right turn to make, and although the beta does now kind of like go over into bike lanes to make the right turn, you can see how indecisive it is about that. I think it's because of those green markings on the ground. So we end up staying in the straight lane, and unfortunately another car goes around us to the right in the bike lane. I don't think he realized that we were actually turning here. He probably just thought we had our turn signal stuck on. Honestly, I probably would have done the same thing. But yeah, this is another one of them robotic mistakes. Let's see how well it recovers now that the light is green. Again, very indecisive on the path planner. It just cannot figure out whether just continuing straight is the best move because it knows it messed up, or just waiting for this car to continue right. It actually does end up waiting for this car to make its move and then follows it through this right-hand turn, which I thought was actually pretty appropriate and pretty well handled. Big shout out to those of you who are still watching. I really truly do appreciate it, and you guys who are still tuned in are the reason I make these videos and why the channel has become what it is. So thank you, and if you're still tuned in and not subscribed, you should probably definitely consider subscribing. I also wanted to mention that I'm using some new editing software. Can you tell? I'm using DaVinci now, which crashes about 100 times less than what I was previously using, and although it's been a pretty steep learning curve for me, I think the FSD visualizations look so much better than my previous videos, and I have a lot of more creative control over what gets filtered out in the green screen effect. Alright, so after that unprotected left that was playing back at warp speed, we have some train tracks. So to begin with, the beta just comes to almost a complete stop after going to that intersection. And then unfortunately, although we have seen improvements to this in other areas where I've seen train tracks, the issue is obviously not completely solved because we are kind of weaving all over the road here and taking those as lane lines. I did, yeah, see the little takeover immediately chime there for a second. I am reporting these as snapshots, so hopefully these clips get sent back to the autopilot team so they're able to review this footage and train on it so that if it encounters a similar situation in the future, it won't do that. It's kind of crazy to me that some of the experiences my car has had is kind of going into the brain of autopilot to get trained on. It really is kind of just crazy to me. We have a car backing out of their driveway ahead. I probably would have stopped way before to kind of give this car plenty of room, but you know, it ended up being fine. They kind of expected us just to continue on through and went off to the side of the road and let us pass. At this stop sign, it's kind of at a large crest, and although we have been at other crests similar to this, for some reason the beta just would not continue. I really don't ever like using the accelerator pedal. I tried like kind of hitting the cruise control stalk and shaking the steering wheel, but I did have to override with the accelerator in this particular instance because it didn't seem like it wanted to move forward there at all. We did reach the end of our navigation route, and because there was some traffic behind us, went ahead and pulled off to the side of the road. I do re-engage with some traffic still flowing though, and you can kind of see autopilot hunting for a gap in traffic here where it's like swinging the steering wheel to the left when it thinks it's ready to, or found a gap, and then swinging the steering wheel back to the right when it's waiting. The moment that it does decide to go, though, was improper. This was not the right time to go. There was a car approaching. Went ahead and sent Tesla another snapshot for that one. I want to remind everybody that full self-driving is still in beta and is definitely not a perfect driver. Our job as beta testers is to pay constant attention to what it's doing and report any mistakes it's making so that it can do a better job the next time around. The troubles people seem to have, though, is thinking of the beta as something static. For example, a lot of the data that guy I made fun of in the beginning of the video used for his little advertisement were videos that were made in 2020. The very first month or two the beta had been released. It's an entirely different animal now, and even their own data that shows the disengagements over time with each software version shows it improving at a rapid pace. So everything is going according to plan. We're now making this unprotected left turn through a stoplight, and it is a little bit difficult to see right now, but there seems to be cars just completely stopped in the lane we're supposed to be going into. Wait, are they just stopped cars? No. In fact, they are parked cars in kind of just the middle of the street, which apparently is allowed here, even though I've never seen anything like it. It takes a second for autopilot to understand this, and then it does start planning a path around, but traffic is approaching from behind, which forces it to wait. A lot of activity through this intersection, but the beta seems to be doing a fairly good job at waiting. It then does decide like it looks like it's ready to proceed, but then the other light turns green and a motorcycle approaches from behind, and then as soon as he passes and everything is very clear, it makes a proper lane change to go around these vehicles. It does display a message saying changing lanes away from these cones, which is a little odd, but despite that oddity, it did get through the situation all on its own without annoying anyone around us, so I am personally perfectly happy with that behavior. It was a rather confusing situation, and I didn't even realize what was going on at first, but it handled it very safely. Ahead of us, we have a car in the road with the hazards on, and autopilot again displays a message that it's changing lanes away from these cones. I don't know why it's doing this all of a sudden. Definitely did not see a single cone displayed in the instrument cluster here, but hey, I guess as long as it's doing the right thing. Here's another situation where it's nice to kind of have eyes in the back of your head. As we proceed, the beta kind of swerves left, and I didn't realize at first what it was doing, but it was because there was that scooter that was approaching quickly behind us. And although that might not have been extreme as the example from earlier, there is a lot to be said regarding the fusion between man and machine, where I can kind of sit back and monitor things while autopilot does the heavy lifting. And not only that, but it really does notice some of these situations unfolding well before I even realize what's going on. Ahead, we have a pedestrian who is standing in the middle of the street who seems to be trying to flag me down. I think he's trying to make some room so his buddy can drive the wrong way down the street. Just another day in San Francisco, I guess. I think it did a really nice job handling that, though. It gave the pedestrian and wrong way car a lot of room, and I doubt either one of them even realized that there was actually an evil cyborg behind the wheel the whole time. I think overall it does do a fairly good job at fooling others on the road, and I don't think people know what's going on, or maybe my license plate gives it away. But what really gives it away are robotic mistakes like this one, where it can't really decide if this was a 2-lane road or a single-lane road, and just kind of does some uncomfortable stuff with its path planning. And kind of the same thing for the situation ahead. You can see it render traffic ahead of this SUV in front of it properly, but then it seems to kind of forget that that traffic is there at all, and instead thinks the SUV is just stopped in the road for no reason. You can kind of see the path planner flicker back and forth, trying to decide what it wants to do.
Is it really gonna try this? I'm gonna try to go somewhere over here. Oh my gosh, it is. Oh my gosh, it's gonna try it.
Oh, I think stuff like this is so funny, and it really does make autopilot feel like it has some personality. It kind of shows the neural network struggling with what it thinks the proper thing to do here would be. As soon as it kind of went around and saw that car ahead, it knew it had made a mistake and kind of just stopped. But oh man, moments like that are so revealing. I really hope with version 11 we see some improvements to the memory. It should definitely remember that there was a car there, even though it can't see it. The traffic ahead, it does some funky stuff here in a second, and another funny thing that I noticed is that it's actually mistaking the sign to our right for a stop sign. It didn't seem to react to it at all or stop in the middle of the road, which I was thankful for, but yeah, just kind of funny. I know it's hard to get a sense of the smoothness of the car over a video, but I can tell you the turning and overall smoothness is much improved with this version. Check out how the beta kind of just drives over all these lines and makes the same path that I probably would have through this corner, and then makes some quick decision making with traffic ahead that I know for sure it would have struggled with in the past on previous versions. We also have a stopped car off to the side of the road ahead, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable to get around him, but watch it slow down and shoot this gap. So it slows down, and then gets in the gap of these two cars to the right and then proceeds. Like, it's just unbelievably smooth compared to old versions. Like, this is definitely a pretty large improvement. And although it had the left-hand turn signal on and had plenty of time to get into that left-hand turn lane, it does not get into the left-hand turn lane, and instead, as this light turns green, it does try to turn left here. So I do end up taking over here because I did not think this was the right move, but in my rearview mirror, I saw that the car behind me did the same thing, but actually went through with the turn. So definitely still don't think that was the correct thing to do, but probably would have been just fine. And I think, honestly, it's just expected around San Francisco, but not how a self-driving car should drive. Gotta have higher standards than humans. Speaking of human qualities, autopilot seems to be getting tired because it starts having a mental breakdown through this intersection, changing lanes away from cones that aren't there, and a complete breakdown in path planning. There was no traffic nearby, so I felt comfortable to just let this happen, but did send another snapshot to Tesla so they can figure out what the heck was going on there. Again, it is called full self-driving beta for a reason, and these mistakes are not only expected, but kind of necessary to make it perform better in the future. I'm sure these intersections and situations look a lot different through the eyes of a neural network. A disengagement happens up here when autopilot decides it wants to give this scooter a bit more room, or the cone, I guess. Still no idea why it started doing that. But because there were cars behind me and I didn't want to be a nuisance to traffic, I did disengage to get it back on the right track. Taking over really wasn't completely necessary. There was definitely no safety risk or anything, but I do have a limit of what I allow the car to do, and it has a lot to do with the traffic situation around me. And the final disengagement happens when our path is going straight through this intersection, but autopilot stays in the left-hand turning lane. Usually I just kind of let this go and see what the car does, but the batteries in my camera were very nearly dead, and I wanted to get to the end of our nav route, which is just down the street. I think situations like this are a bit odd because the road and arrows were pretty clearly marked, so I submitted one final snapshot back there. But overall, despite the beta getting seemingly tired at the end of this video, I think there's a big increase in disengagements. This update is a huge improvement in a ton of different ways. It is getting more and more confident in places like this, and I cannot wait until I never have to drive in San Francisco again, and instead can just get shuttled around while I'm making YouTube videos about it in the back seat. If you are still watching, you are freaking awesome. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. I will be right back at it when I get back from vacation, and can't wait to experiment more with this new editing software. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at AIDriver, just like my YouTube channel. I post there kind of randomly and usually do some sneak peeks of upcoming videos because they take forever to finish editing. But anyways, thanks again for watching, you guys. You really are the best. Bye.